need to protect ourselves. And the place that a Jewish person goes to protect himself and his family from the difficulties and the challenges of a decadent society, the place where we go is to a Jewish home. A house, the walls of a house, are our protection from that world. I could ask you the question this way, although I already gave you the answer now. I heard that there's a saying that it could be that due to these explorers that went out to Mars, that they think there might be life there. So let's say that it happened that there was some sort of life out there. And they go out to the dark side of Mars, and they find that there's some sort of creature. And this creature's heard that on planet Earth, there are these people who are called Jews. And he wants to find out about them. He goes, I've heard, even in Mars, we heard about you. Why? Because there's probably somebody who went out collecting for some Jewish organization, so we heard about this. So he wants to know, where do I find out about them? How do I find out about it? So where would you take him? So some people would say we would take him to a yeshiva, we would take him to a school. Others would say, no, we take him to a Beit Knesset. Others might say, maybe we would take him to the land of Israel. Those are all excellent answers. But my belief, if you wanted to find out what Judaism is really about, what living the life of a Jew is really about, it's not about the Beit Knesset, and it's not about the yeshiva, and it's not even about the land of Israel. It's about a Jewish home. That's where we learn what it really means to be Jewish. So if the Jewish home, if the house, is our fortress against the outside world, then we have to figure out, how do we go about building a Jewish home? What does that look like? What are the elements and what is the essence of building a bayit, of building that type of building that can stand as a protection, as a guarding place, a fortress against those influences? So to answer that question, I would like to share with you an insight of the rabbis in the Talmud in the sect of Rosh Hashanah. There the Talmud has an interesting discussion about which month the world was created in. According to the first opinion, the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, it says that the world was created, when God created the world, He created it in the month of Tishrei. That's the month of Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Yehoshua says, no, the world was not created in the month of Tishrei. The world was created in the month of Nisan, which is the month of Passover, Pesach. That's an interesting dispute, which we're not going to go into. What does that mean exactly? But that's a dispute between the Chachamim, between the sages of the Gemara. When was the world created? One of the commentaries to the Talmud, the Tosafot, they bring two poems which were written by Rabbi Elazar HaKavir, who is the one who authored many, many poems, many of which we say in particular on Tisha B'Av. And he wrote one poem, which is recited during the month of Tishrei, in which he said, this is the month in which the world was created. And then guess what? He wrote another poem for the month of Nisan, when we pray for dew, not for rain, but for dew. So he said, this is the month in which the world was created. So that seems to be technically against the rules. Because while the rabbis originally could have had a dispute, hundreds of years later, when Rabbi Elazar HaKavir lived, he needs to have decided whose opinion do you hold by. Was it Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah time, or was it Nisan? Was it Pesach time? Which wasn't? So the Tosfos answers and says, we have a perfect resolution, perfect Talmudic resolution to this issue. You want to guess what it is? No? That good one? Tekel means Eliyahu will come and tell us what it is. You know what the answer is? It was created in both. Great Talmudic answer. One said it was created in Tishrei, the other said it was created in Nisan. How can it be? He writes poems for each one. How can it be they did that? You know why? Because the world was created in both months. It was created both in Tishrei and it was created in Nisan. How does that work? So Tosfos explains the following. That in Tishrei, Hashem created the world in His mind. He created it b'machshava. In his thoughts, he created the world. When did he create it, as we would say, l'maisa? Practically speaking, when did he actually get down to construct the world? That was in the month of Nisan. What does this mean for us? It means that if we want to create our homes in the way that Hashem created this world, which is our home, which is probably a pretty good idea. If we could create something in the way that he created it, that would be excellent. He's giving us a good plan for how to go about doing that. So he gave us a very, very important rule. And that rule is that if you want to create something, and if what you are creating, you want it to have a key, you want it to continue to exist, then you have to create it in two stages. First, you have to create it in your thoughts. And then, once you have a clear plan of what it is that you want to build, then you can go about building it practically. Creation comes in two stages. There's a creation of machshava, a creation in thought, and then a creation in deed. If anybody's had the privilege of being able to build a home, so you know that the first person you call is a mortgage broker to find out whether you can get the money together to build a home. Once you arrange the financing. So then the next person you call is an architect. He's got to create a plan. You call the architect, he creates the plan, and then afterwards you call a kabbalah. Then you will call a contract. So you have to call the president. Was there any mortgage brokers? First, you have to have someone who can create the picture of what you want it to look like, and then you can find someone who can actually build it. Now, who's the architect?
Avi.
Okay, so let me ask you something. If you draw architectural plans and you're a few centimeters off, is that a problem?
Depends what the material is.
But there's a good chance that
Pretty much.
The answer.
Okay, good. And you're the kabbalah, you're the contractor. If you're a few centimeters off, that's like a cause for celebration. Right? You're only a couple centimeters. That's the way it usually works. When you're creating the plan, which is why it is that plan had to be in Tishrei, because Tishrei is the time of din, of judgment, of precision. So the plan has to be as exact as you can possibly make it. When you try to work on the plan and enact the plan, so then if you're within a few yards of where it is that you hope to be, so you're already doing a good job. Because that's the time of chesed. That's kindness and there's wiggle room and it doesn't have to be so exact. It's the same way in building our homes spiritually. We cannot build a home which is going to protect us from the world out there unless we have a clear picture of what we want that home to look like, not in terms of the walls, not in terms of the paint, not in terms of the window dressings, and not in terms of the furnishings, but in terms of the spirituality of the home, the values of the home. We cannot build a home that will stand to guard us from the oppressive world on the outside unless the people who are in that home have a clear picture in their mind of what they want that home to be. Does that make sense? Anybody want to argue that point? Don't do it, please. So let me ask you a question. How many of you really sat down as a couple, mother and father, husband and wife, and sat down and said, here is the mission statement, here's the vision that we have for our home. How many of you sat down when you got married and said, here's the real picture of what we want to create in our marriage? Anybody here do jigsaw puzzles? Anybody ever do a jigsaw puzzle? No one? Yeah, someone? What's the biggest jigsaw puzzle anybody's done? Anybody done 500 pieces? Oh, come on. Yeah? Yeah? Anybody done 1,000 pieces?
Just.
Yeah, just. So how long did it take you to do 1,000 pieces jigsaw puzzle? A long time. How long do you think it would have taken you if you didn't have the box that tripped you? We have a principal in our school, Mr. Schwartzman, so she does jigsaw puzzles, she doesn't look at the box. Because otherwise, it's no competition. But for normal people, for regular people, we need a box. We need a picture. So let me ask you another question. Which do you think is more complicated? You don't have to raise your hands. Being married or putting together a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle? You don't have to answer. Raising a child or putting together a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle? So we all know that that's way, way more complicated. So how can you hope to do it if you don't have a picture? How can you hope to do it if you don't have a box? What are you trying to build? What do you want it to look like at the end of the day? And it's a little bit embarrassing, but it's not too late to think that we're as far along in the game as we are without having really clarified what it is that we want this house to be. What are the values for our home? What makes our home unique? What are the things that we stand for? What are the things that we can tell our children that even though they might do it in other people's houses, in our house we don't? And what are some things that we can tell our children that in our house we do? What are the values that we are really dedicated to within this home? What's really important to us? Because if we want to raise Jewish children within that home, they have to know what the vision is. They have to know where we're going. They have to know consistently and regularly from their parents what is really important to them. And only if that vision is clear, only if we have a very defined picture of what that is, can we hope that our picture will be able to compete against the other pictures that are out there. Would you say that in Los Angeles there are other pictures out there? There's other competing pictures? Now, I have read it with Ohr Eliyahu. So he says when he first started coming back to Los Angeles, this is going back 20 years, so he used to say, he told people, I'm going to Los Angeles. They said, we have one piece of advice for you. Don't look up. That was the advice. Don't look up. There's many competing pictures that are out there. And you better believe there's even more competing pictures that your kids are seeing that you might not even be aware of. You can't fight a picture with just an idea. You have to fight a picture with a picture. Have we created a clear picture in the minds of our children of what we want from them as people, as Jews? Is that a clear picture to them? And is it a consistent picture that they're able to identify and to be able to follow? So we have to think, what are the values we really want to give them? Now, one of the things that wasn't mentioned is that I did spend, it's been a while, it's probably been 10 years since I was really involved. The 10 years previous to the last 10 years, I did spend a lot of time working for an organization here in Los Angeles called Chelkenu. So, which was an outreach program for Persian young people. So I do have experience going for a decade in dealing with the Persian community. I understand from my work with this community, as well as from the experience of watching my parents, who were also first-generation American immigrants. And I understood what they wanted most was to gain a foothold in the United States of America. That's what was important for them. They came from Europe, Eastern Europe, they came to the United States, they wanted to be secure in this country. So what was important? Education. What was important? Having a good job. And sometimes these other values were not emphasized as much. And unfortunately, what happened to that generation is that they lost their young people. Because there was a lot of emphasis put on making a good living, becoming a good American, having a foothold in this country, being successful. That was the message, that was the picture that was created. And unfortunately, of those of my generation, the vast majority of them did not marry people who were Jewish. They did not remain loyal to the traditions. Because that wasn't a picture that was painted within the home. I'm an enigma. I'm unusual. And those people who stuck with it were unusual. Because we live in an environment that was not going that way. So without a very strong picture, it was just easy to follow the flow and to disappear, which is unfortunately what happened to many of my generation. And one of the reasons that I dedicated myself for those 10 years to working in the Persian community was because I wanted to do what I could to be sure that these fine people did not follow the same path that the Ashkenazim had done when they came to this country. Let the good Iranian people learn from the Ashkenazis' mistakes so that they don't have to go in that same direction. So we have to be able to create that picture and to build that world and to send a message which will be one that our children will be willing to hold on to. So we have to consider, if we're going to be saving up and prepared to send them to get the finest in a college education, in a secular education, how much are we willing to sacrifice and to pay to be sure they get the most high quality Jewish education? Because I'll tell you something about children. They've got excellent radar. And there was a person in America, his name was P.T. Barnum. He was a person who made the Barnum and Bailey Circus, if you ever heard of that. He used to say that you can fool some of the people all the time, and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. So I believe that if you're really good, you can fool all the people all the time. But you can't fool a kid for a second. Children understand what we're really about. Close second are wives. We think, guys, sometimes we think we can fool them, but no, it doesn't really work that way. But kids, for sure, you can't fool them. So they need to see that if we want to tell them that Judaism is important, if we want them to feel that Judaism is something they can enjoy, and we want them to raise their children Jewish, so then, and we want them to do it happily, so obviously they need to see dedication and warmth and excitement in terms of our attachment to Judaism. Again, to take an example, a bad example from the Ashkenazi world, there was a great rabbi, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha. And he said that one of the reasons that so many people in the Ashkenazi world went off and left the world of Torah was because they heard from their parents a statement that said that it's so hard to be a Jew. We're doing it, but it's so hard to be a Jew. So in America, kids are not so interested in doing things that are hard. I don't know if you've noticed that. They're not so interested in that. So when they're hearing constantly from their parents, okay, we're Jewish, but it's so hard to be a Jew. So the people of my generation, they said, hard? No, thank you. I'm going to go the easy way. What they needed to hear was that it's delicious to be a Jew, that it's fun to be a Jew, that it's meaningful to be a Jew, that it gives me strength, that it gives me purpose and meaning in my life to be a Jew. That's what they needed to hear. Unfortunately, because it was hard, the only thing that they heard was that it's hard to be a Jew. If we want them to be happy about it, we have to be happy about it. If we want them to be dedicated, then we have to be dedicated. And they know very clearly what is the important value in our life. They are watching us very, very carefully to see where our energy is, where our excitement is, what we really think is important. I'll tell you a story. There was a man, he was a Rebbe. He was a teacher in an elementary school yeshiva in Israel. And Rabbi Ohr Eliyahu was speaking to him, to this man's son one time. And he asked the little boy, the son of the Rebbe, he asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? So the little boy said, I want to be a bus driver just like my father. So Rabbi Ohr Eliyahu said, you want to be a bus driver like your father? Your father's a Rebbe. Your father's an elementary school teacher. What do you mean you want to be a bus driver like your father? So the boy said, oh, I know my father's a Rebbe. But whenever we go on a bus, in Israel people ride buses, whenever we go on a bus, so my father always sits right behind the bus driver. And he asks him, how do you turn that big wheel? And what's this button for? And what does that switch do? And he's fascinated by what's going on with the bus driver. So the little boy said, I want to be a bus driver just like my father really wants to be a bus driver. Wow. working, he's dedicated to being a Rebbe, he thinks he's setting a fine example. You know what? Our kids are watching us all the time. I want to be a bus driver, just like my father really wanted to be a bus driver. Because that's what really holds his fascination, that's what he's interested in, that's what makes him excited. So I want to follow in his ways. So that's kind of a difficult question. If our children were to ask them, what do they want to do? And they said, well, I want to be such and such, just like my father. So what would that be? What do they really see? And remember, it's that house that we're building and the values that we put into that house. What is a house? It's walls and a roof that protect you from the outside. That's what a house is. It protects you from it. It protects you from it. Spiritually, it means it's protecting you from all of those influences which will eat away at what is really important in terms of Jewish values. So what are our kids really seeing? So you understand that if we want to protect ourselves and to raise Jewish children in a non-Jewish world, we have to have an opportunity of what we want that house to look like. And if we put our time and our effort and our money into the material furnishings, but we don't put at least the same amount of time and effort and money into the spiritual furnishings, then our kids are going to be gone. And then when it comes to time for them to decide who are they going to marry, and how are they going to live, and what are they going to pass on to their children, we might find that they pass on the real message that they got, not the one that we pretended that we were giving them, but the real message, which is the one that we behaved according to. The great Rabbeinu Yonah says on a verse in the book of Proverbs, Ish lefi mahalelo, that you can understand a person by his praise. He says you can understand a person by what he praises. What does he really get excited about? So we have to know that we're showing excitement for other things. They're watching us. The kids are watching us. I heard once from a rabbi, he said that if you go to the refrigerator, this is for men, if you go to the refrigerator in the middle of the night, you're thirsty, and there's a bottle of soda over there, nobody's watching, your wife is not around. They have no cameras. So you have a bottle of soda, so you take the bottle, you drink it right out of the bottle, because your kids are watching you. Don't think that they're sleeping. There's hardly anything that we can do that they're not picking up on the way it is. So we have to be sure, first of all, that we have created a clear picture, that we know what we want, that we worked it out with our spouse. What do we want this house to be? What do we want it to have? What are the values here? What's important? What's most important? What's secondary? You know, every business that wants to raise money, so if you don't have a mission statement, you don't have a business plan, you're not going to find investors. So if you want your kids to invest, you got to have a plan. You could get people to invest money in your business without a business plan. Well, your kids are not going to invest their lives in your business unless you have a plan, unless you can show it to them clearly. It means you have to talk about it. You have to talk about it with them. You have to try to encourage their buy-in. You have to help them to see that this is really what's important in life. You got to create a picture for them, so that when they put together all those pieces, they know what it is that they should be for at the end. You know, sometimes kids pick up. We want to talk about the question that was mentioned: we want our kids to marry Jewish. So you know why sometimes they don't? It's because they think that Judaism is just a lifestyle choice. It's not a lifestyle. They get together, my family gets together on Friday nights. They get together a couple times a year, maybe on Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. They get together and they perform these rituals. They get together and have rituals, ceremonies and rituals. Ceremonies and rituals will not overcome love. So when this boy, chas v'shalom, or girl, chas v'shalom, meets someone who's not Jewish, and they fall in love, and their parents tell them, but you're Jewish and they're not. Judaism's a lifestyle choice. Judaism is a bracha that you make on a cup of wine on a Friday night. It's the families get together over once a year on Passover when people fall asleep. Can't wait till we get to the food. You know what a ritual is? A ritual is an action that a person takes that has no meaning. My grandkids now, I would say it about my kids when they were young, and I would say my grandkids. So they think that their parents have a funny ritual. You know what the ritual is? That before they go to sleep at night, they have to take this little brush and put this paste on it and they have to rub it on the teeth. So they think it's just some silly ritual. They don't understand cavities, the little ones. They don't understand it's protecting their teeth. This is one of the things that you do before you go to sleep. It's like a bedtime story. It's a ritual. Judaism is not about rituals and ceremonies. Judaism is about a world of relationships. It's about relationships. How we relate to each other, how we relate to Hashem, how we relate to plants, how we relate to animals. It's about relationships. It's a world of yedidus. It's a world of connections. And if we want our children to remain Jewish, then we have to strengthen those relationships. Think about it. Everything that is important in life is really a relationship. Everything. It's all about relationships. And all relationships are based on trust. You can't have a relationship unless there's trust. Everything that's important is a relationship. And all relationships are based on trust. If I get a paycheck and I put it to the bank, I trust that the bank will give it back to me. Or if I don't trust the bank, I trust the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that they'll give it back to me. Because, at least in my account, it's less than $250,000. So I'm sure that I'm going to get it. I trust the United States government. I drove here tonight. I passed a lot of green lights. So how come I could go through the green light? I trusted the fact that the people would stop at the red light that was coming the other way. Everything is based on trust. If you want to know what children need in terms of education and from their parents, they need to know that they can trust them. They need to know that parents are consistent. They need to know that the parents don't just talk the talk, but they walk the talk. Because they're watching everything and they're seeing it. Judaism is not about rituals and ceremonies. It's about relationships. So therefore we say that, in our Torah, when it says, thou shalt not kill. So you know what that means for a Jew? It doesn't mean that you don't murder somebody. We know that. We have the Torah to tell us that you shouldn't murder. You know what it comes to tell us? That you can't embarrass somebody in public. Because we have a different level of relationship. When it says you shouldn't steal, it doesn't mean you shouldn't rob someone of his possessions. It means you shouldn't use something that belongs to him without his permission. Because we have a deeper relationship. If I have a dog, I have to feed it before I feed myself. Because the Torah governs my relationship with that dog. If I have a fruit tree, and the Torah says if you're waging a war and you're fighting against the enemy, and there's a fruit tree, you can't destroy the fruit tree. It's a fruit tree. Al Tashit. We don't destroy things unnecessarily. We have a relationship with plants. Everything is a world of relationships. That's what the Torah is bringing your children into. So if we want to know what needs to be at the center of this picture that we're creating, it's a picture about the importance of relationships. That speaks to me. Rituals, not going to stand up against love. Truth, relationships, that will stand up against love. It's because young people don't understand that Judaism has to do with truth. It's emet. You can't, how can you marry someone and it's not going to be truthful? It's just a lifestyle choice. So I don't need to go into details and tell you what's considered a lifestyle choice these days. And any lifestyle choice. But you'll excuse me, but in the public schools in Los Angeles, California, so it's getting to the point that children can choose. Do they want to go to the boys' room? Do they want to go to the girls' room? Everything's a choice. Everything is a truth. It's not truth. It's all just how you happen to feel. It's scary. So Maybe it's not physical education doesn't like it, but it's art. So there's something during the day to look forward to and feel successful. And that's a constitutional right of every child to feel that there's a time that he can feel successful. Have many definitions of success. Because if we say, well, in order to be a Goldberg, then you have to be, good looking, really smart, and be excellent, and become a rabbi and a doctor, both. And then we'll accept you in the family. So then what we do? We end up separating people into a few winners and a whole lot of losers. And we can't afford that. So number one is be understanding, not judgmental. Number two, be inclusive, not exclusive. And finally, the susiyat, make a fence around the Torah, which means a fence does not have to be electrified barbed wire. There's a concept that's called sulu b'shoshan, a fence of roses. Why do people respect a fence of roses? It's not because of the thorns. Because otherwise the Talmud would have said a fence of cactus, because they have bigger thorns. You know why people respect a fence of roses? Because it's so beautiful. We want our kids, like you were saying, to buy into Judaism because it's so beautiful. Why is the whole world not Shomer Shabbat? All the Jews. Why are they not all Shomer Shabbat? You know why? Because we who are Shomer Shabbat have not shown them how beautiful it is. I haven't found a person out there that I've wanted to give them $1 million who say, no. Even if they had $1 million, they could always use nothing. So if they're not buying in to Shabbat, it must be that I haven't expressed to them how beautiful it is. Those are the elements of unconditional love. I'm trying to understand you, I'm trying to include you, and I'm not trying to manipulate you and coerce you into doing things. I want to show you how beautiful it is that you're doing life. That's the floor of a Jewish home. What are the walls? The walls are discipline. Children need discipline. Even children if you have a floor of love, then you can have walls of discipline. What does it mean, discipline? Discipline means you're consistent. One word only. You're consistent. It doesn't mean you yell and scream. It doesn't mean you punish. It doesn't mean you give huge prizes because they did a little something correct. It means that when you say yes, it means yes. And when you say no, it means no. And you stick to it. Has anybody had a little boy or a little girl had a little toy car and they ran, when they first got it, they ran it into the wall? They pedal and pedal and they run into the wall. And when they run it into the wall the first time, they get very frustrated. Then they realize that the wall's not going anywhere. As frustrated as they get, that wall's not moving. So they realize you have to go into reverse and go the other way. At first they get frustrated, and then they realize the wall's not moving. So I'm not going to go that way anymore. I'm going to back up. You understand that if we are totally permissive in everything that we do, and everything for our children is a possibility, it means they're going to get totally frustrated. Because there's so many things they think they can do that they can't do. Frustration comes when you think you can or you should be able to, and you can't. So the more permissive you are, the more likely your kids are going to be frustrated. Anybody here ever been stuck in a traffic jam in Los Angeles? Anybody ever gets frustrated by being stuck in a traffic jam in Los Angeles? What were you frustrated over? I'm late. I'm hungry. People are waiting for me. I'm frustrated by a lot of things. Were you frustrated by the fact that you didn't have a car that could fly over them, over the other cars and get right to your house? Did that frustrate you, that you didn't have a flying car?
Coming soon.
Coming soon. Are you frustrated by that now? No, because it's not possible. We're only frustrated by those things that are possible. So if we set boundaries, walls for our children which are reasonable, and then we just calmly and consistently enforce the rule, it sounds easier than, it's a lot harder than what I'm saying. But it really comes down to just one word: consistently holding your ground in a nice way without giving in. So then we've given them walls that will protect them. What's the air filled inside a Jewish home? If you have walls and a roof, you know what it's filled with on the inside? Encouragement. Because encouragement is how children internalize values. Not through punishment and not through rewards. That's not how they internalize. Because that's an external thing. It didn't become a part of them. If they don't care about the punishment, or they can get the reward somewhere else, then they're not going to buy into the value. We have some of our teachers, so they have these games, they get prizes, and you get raffle tickets and you win the thing. Sometimes a kid loses. I've had it in my school. Kid said to the teacher, who they didn't win the prize, he said, no big deal, my mother's going to buy me a thing. Rewards and punishments can get kids going, but it doesn't educate them. It doesn't educate them. Education means for the future. Rashi says that education means the beginning of the entrance into a person's destiny. Education is what's going to be in the future. King Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, he said that Chanoch l'naro pidarko, educate a child according to his way, and then even when he gets old, he won't depart from it. Education means he sticks to it even years ahead in the future. Rewards and punishments get kids to do things now. That's not education. There are people who can get an elephant to balance on a ball. They can do it. If you punish him enough or reward him enough, you can get an elephant to balance on a ball. Have you educated the elephant? You trained him, but you didn't educate him. And unfortunately, when you do that, you know how you get an elephant to balance on a ball? You have to make him not an elephant. Because no self-respecting elephant will balance on a ball. So the first thing you have to do is break his spirit. You break his spirit, then you get him to balance on a ball. We don't want to break our kids' spirits. We want to harness their spirit. What's the air in a Jewish home filled with? It's filled with encouragement. Encouragement means, I see you doing something that I like, and I let you know that I saw it. It doesn't mean that I tell you you're the biggest tzaddik that ever came on the planet. This is totally amazing. You carry the plate to the sick. It's unbelievable. I've never seen such a thing. But it does mean saying, you took the plate to the sick, thank you. Going on to the next. They did what you wanted them to do. They did the right thing. You noticed it. Not that you made a huge deal out of it. If you make a huge deal, oh, you're a tzaddik. Well, I don't have to be a tzaddik. Where does this have to be a tzaddik? I just have to be a regular guy. So I guess I'm just volunteering. I'm sorry. I'm for 2 years old, not a tzaddik. Thank you. You picked it up. You picked up your block. Thank you. On to the next. Yeah, no, I know. But don't do that. I'm telling you, don't do that. Why is he a tzaddik? Because he put his block with him. And it doesn't say he has to be a tzaddik. It just says he has to be a regular person. So is he volunteering? He's not volunteering. He needs to put that block away. He needs to put that away. So when he puts it away, so you notice it. And when kids get positive, it doesn't have to be a huge amount, just a little bit of noticing that they did the right thing, then that takes the value and it puts it on the inside. Not because of the cookie, or not because of being yelled at, they did something wrong. But when they are encouraged for doing the right thing, it takes the value and it makes it part of who they are. Because just like we need a house to protect us from the influences from the outside, there's going to come a time when they leave the house, right? So then what? So then they have to have themselves be their house. They have to carry it around with them. It has to be on the inside of them. So that no matter where they go, they have those values with them, even when they're not aware. And I don't know how it is with this generation, but in the previous generations, I know that sometimes in this community, people stayed in their parents' house for a really long time. So now, it could be that maybe they're out. So when you go out, it still has to be that you're taking it with you. The way that we internalize values, think about yourself. The things you hold on to is because somebody noticed it and encouraged it. It's called idud. Idud in Hebrew is from Lashon ad, means until. And the Lashon and the word od. Encouragement helps us to do more and more until we reach our ya'ad, which means our goal. Idud is doing od va'od until we reach a ya'ad, until we reach our goal in our destiny. That's a Jewish home. The floor, unconditional love. The walls, discipline. The air on the inside, encouragement. That's like a very brief overview of some things that we can do in terms of protecting us from the world. Do you have any questions? I went a little over time already, but I'm still here. So do you have any questions?
Roof? What's the roof?
The roof is like the walls. But the roof really comes from discipline. It comes from the walls. That's what we would call Yirat Shamayim. Yirat Shamayim means a recognition that there is authority in the world. And that the world is not, as we say, I don't know which translation, the world's not hefker. It's not just ownerless for us to do whatever we feel. There are rules and regulations that happen in the world, and we have to abide by that. There's authority. My parents are authority, my teachers are authority, God is an authority. So it's good for children to learn that there's such a thing as authority. It would be my advice to you that when your children are young, you get them into the habit of standing up for you twice a day. When you walk into the room twice a day, you should train them to stand up for you. Why? Because you're there. It's good for them. It's healthy for them to stand up for their parents. It doesn't have to be every single time. Once in the morning and once in the afternoon, they should stand up. It has to be clear that if you make a request, it doesn't have to say, please, would you mind? Put the plate in the sink. Put the plate in the sink. So that they understand that there are people who can tell them what to do. That's healthy. Not every single thing all day long. And you can say it in a nice tone of voice. And you can even say please. Could you please put that in the sink? Because it matters your tone of voice, not the please. Please put that in the sink. Okay, I'm going. Say it again. Say it again. Say it again. No hitting, no yelling. I'm expecting you to put it in the sink. I want a very important thing. Just because they don't do it right that second, doesn't mean that you lost. As long as you don't get upset, you don't get angry, and you keep telling them, I'm expecting you to do it. Because they feel uncomfortable. They don't like that uncomfortable feeling. They know that they should. Eventually they will. But if we make the mistake of making it a power struggle, you better do it, and I'm going to force you, and I'm going to stand over you, and you yell. And then it's a power struggle. That's fun. For a child to be able to think that they can get their parents upset, and fight with their parents and maybe win. Now he's defining what's happening. If you just consistently say, he needs to go in the sink, it could be he's not doing it. But he's also feeling, it's not so exciting. I might make it not so comfortable for them. And I might later on say, I asked you to do that and you didn't listen, so there might be something that would come up later that you might want to, because of that I can't do something I really would want to do. But it doesn't have to be right then. Rewards and punishments are best used when they're not connected to a particular thing. In my school, I tell the teachers, don't make it that if you do this, then you get the reward. Make it that they're doing well, and then all of a sudden you surprise them that they're going to get extra 5 minutes a week. We've been learning so well, I'm giving everybody an extra 10 minutes recess. Wow. You know what? I saw this in the store, and I bought one for each of you because you've been doing such a great job and so well behaved. It's worthwhile to come to school today. Maybe something good's going to happen. Meanwhile, if the prize is related to an action, so then my mother's going to buy me a better one. So you don't want to connect it. That was really the research shows that this works the best also. It's proved scientifically. If you want the kids to do it, you want to surprise them. And if they're doing something wrong, so then you need to, you don't always have to warn them what the punishment's going to be. It can just be that it happens that way. But you have to be very sure. It depends on the age of the child. You can't demand things of a child which are beyond their ability to do at a particular age. Sometimes we want them to stay at a Shabbat table way too long, and they should be expected to stay at that table. Or the children come home with these questions on the parsha. And then at the table, they have to sit there and answer these questions. I don't know why you can't say the questions to the parsha sitting on the couch relaxing. I didn't see that it's a halakha, Shulchan Aruch that says you have to say the parsha questions at the table. The kid's enjoying it, he's feeling good, it's so terrific. But why should there be tension? People ask me, how long should fathers learn with their children? So my answer is 5 minutes less than a child wants to learn. It's like a good speech, which this is not okay. You want to make it a little bit less than what people want. Keep them wanting to learn. So people ask me, well, what if he doesn't want to learn with my son? What if my son doesn't want to learn with me at all? And you tell me 5 minutes less than he wants, and he doesn't want it at all. So my answer is, play a game with him. He doesn't want to learn. Because you can always find him a remedy. He's got only one father. Wow. He's got one father. You can always find some games. Sometimes learning is tension. especially if he doesn't know. You get frustrated. This is your son. You know what's going to be, so just leave all. If the learning doesn't happen, big brownies and a lot of good feeling, and some delicious drink, and a lot of warmth and hugs, so then don't do it. Because what's it about? It's about relationships. It's not about rituals. It's about relationships. So you want to be sure that what you're doing. The Torah has to build a relationship. The Torah separates people and is nervous and anxious and upset.
So what if the kids are preconditioned to not listening until the voices are yelling home and then they listen? How do we change it?
Well, you have to prepare yourself. And you have to decide that no matter what is going to happen, I am not going to respect this. Because that's a sign of weakness. Now, if it's dangerous, that's a different story. I'm not talking about dangerous. I'm just talking about that they're not clearing the way. They're not getting what they're told. And then you have to use your mind to figure out how can you say it in a way that will get them to do it. And you have to be sure that if they're exhausted, if they're tired, if it's been a long day for them also, if your nerves are also frazzled, so leave them. And you have to know. Yeah, you have to. Is it, where's the child? Where's the child right now? What can be expected of him? And where am I right now? Before you make these decisions. But children are harmed. You know, don't take this wrong, please. But children are harmed more by being screamed at than they are by being hit. So I'm not telling you to hit them. I'm just telling you don't scream. It makes them nervous. And one of the reasons it makes them nervous is because they see their parents losing control, and that's not healthy. Because the children want to trust you. They want to rely on you. So if they see you losing control, so then I thought I could rely on you. But I see you on. If I can get into that state, it's scary for them when we lose control. Now it takes work. You got to practice. Yeah. That's why you have to work together, one to support the other. When I hear my kids saying something that is inappropriate that I know they got from me. So then I tell my wife, take care of it. Because I'm already, I can't, if I'm hearing my own words coming back at me, so I said, I'm out of the picture. So I'm really scared to go out and see about that. Pretend it's somebody else's dream. It's true. It's true, right? We've got loads of patience for it. Leave them alone. It's not a hard day. Are you making a big deal? It's mine. Pretend it's somebody else's. But this is a very important point. Remember, they can get other teachers, they can get other people, other professionals. They have only one job. They need that forever. And you want them to feel that they can talk to you and they can trust you. Because if they can't get over that when they're 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, then when they're 13, 14, 15, and 16, when you're desperate to have them talk to you, they're not going to talk to you. And then you need to have them talk to you. There's those really serious things that come up when they're 13, 14, 16. So how do you do that? You have to be sure that they learn that you listen and be reasonable when they're 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then 10 years later. So then they'll listen to you.
Can you repeat the question?
Every time, the question is, if we have the children stand up for us, that's a kind of fear, or reverence. Doesn't that take away from the warmth and the closeness that a parent would want to feel? Rashi defines a father. Rashi. We're going to read it. It says, Yosef said to Yasimeni la'av l'pav. that I was made as a father to poverty. Yosef was on the father to poverty. Rashi says there, what's a father? He says two words, chaver and patron. A chaver is a friend. A patron, the commentators say, is Greek for the captain of the ship. So what do kids want from a father? They want someone who's a leader, who knows where they're going. Even if you don't know where you're going, the kid needs to think you know where you're going. And I used to talk about this now in the church. Maybe it's not so funny. But go back to September 11th, 2001. So the Twin Towers just fell. George Bush has to give a speech. So imagine if he got up there and he said, those were our best buildings. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't even know what these guys are. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. So you can imagine. Now, that might have been what he was feeling. But he said, we're going to find these guys. We're going to wipe them out. I don't know where we are right now, but we'll use the full power of the United States and we will find them and chase them down. And we will see that justice is done. That's what a person wants to hear. So a child wants to know his father's in control. He also wants to know that he's a chaver. He's a friend. There's a great rabbi, Rav Shimon Schwab, who's a blessed memory. So he said that the first person in Chumash who was called a friend was Chira Ha'adulomi. We're going to read about him in this week's parsha. He was the one when Yehuda made this mistake with this lady who he really shouldn't have been involved with. And she took his ring and his walking stick. And then he left without them. And then he had to try to find her. And he couldn't go himself. So he sent his friend Chira Ha'adulomi to go get them. So he says a friend is someone that you can confide your most embarrassing secret to and sleep. So I can confide in somebody. It doesn't have to be my best friend. I can confide in my Rebbe. I can confide in my teacher. I can confide in my father. It doesn't have to be, we can be friends in that way. It doesn't have to be, he's a friend like the guy I play basketball with or hang out with. There's still a closeness, even though there's a certain difference. I still know he's my father and I'm the son. I love him. I can confide in him. We're very close. But it's still, he's the father and I'm the son. It doesn't have to take away from him. It doesn't take away. And it's interesting to note that when the Torah says that you have to fear your mother and father, it says a child naturally, a son naturally fears his father. So Rashi says why does he fear his father? Because his father teaches him Torah. Not because his father is a slap. Not because his father is a plakah. Because his father teaches him Torah. So the fear that we talk about is a reverence that comes from the fact that my father is wise. That's the fear. He's going to come across a listener. He needs to know that people have authority. He's going to come across his boss. He needs to know that people have authority. He's going to get married. He's going to have to know his wife has authority. He's got to be clear on certain things. Otherwise, it's not going to go so easy. He's got to be used to knowing that there are people who have authority. That's just healthy. Otherwise, he's going to get messed up. Yes.
So, on the issue of
if anybody wants to go get something to drink or eat, you have to feel it's cooked up. If you have to leave completely, it's also okay.
On the issue of authority, it can also go to the extreme that becomes a military style. Like how much, let's say a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 16-year-old, and you want to call them to come for whatever reason. So you call them, you expect them to come out or you won't. How much time before you think it's inappropriate?
They should come practical. At 5, 10, and 15, they should come right away.
Or if you do something, so you come 3 minutes later.
Doing your homework, I'm on my way. Is it consistent? Are they consistent? Are they ignoring you or are they really following you? Is it done respectfully or not respectfully? It's very hard to say. Very hard to say. That's a relationship. But like anyone else, you want to judge the paper. Sometimes it gets they didn't come right away. It's most effective to have a conversation with them about it, not writing time. But at a different time. Like he's about to leave, he finally came, he's about to leave the table. So you tell him, I'm asking you. In a classroom, so it's easier for me to describe it there. You have a boy who's, I don't know, he's throwing things at another kid. So it's disruptive to the class. So what am I going to do? I'm going to try to keep on teaching. Because I don't want to get involved with this kid. But if I get involved with him, it's much more interesting than anything else I might be teaching. So I want to just keep on teaching. So I'm going to keep on teaching if I can. It's now time for recess. As he's going out to recess, so I say, Yaakov, now the clock is ticking, and it's on his clock because of recess. Am I telling him I'm taking away your recess? No, because that's a declaration of war. Yaakov, can I talk to you for just a second? What do you think happened today in class that I think this? Now it's on his clock. Paper things, spitballs or whatever it is that are filled. I have about 10 speeches on the subject that I really this time. I bet it's at this conference. Oh no, I got it. I thought so. How much of his recess did I take away? About 45 seconds. Now when he comes back from the recess, he sits down. In the first minute, he's not throwing something at the kid next to him. So I'm going to give him a call. It cost me 45 seconds. I didn't get involved in the conversation. I discussed it with him afterwards. A conversation is a consequence. Conversation is a consequence. So it doesn't have to be this whole cultural approach. It's this specific. I know my rules, that's good. So you have to. I read it as a book out, which is it recommends that you have to start training. It says the age requirement. It says the age requirement is designated place in the living room where you're not allowed to call. And then when you go to that, it might not be in every country. You want them to learn that in these certain places you can't go. So every time he calls over here, you give him carefully, you say, well, he calls back again, carefully, you say, well. And if you're not around, you're going to share a message. Because otherwise, again, if you're not around, you can't go. For one purpose only, and that's to get them used to the fact that other fathers in the road are allowed to go. Just as they understand if somebody was okay, and that's a little bit too late. So you have to say, you find things that give them instructions, request for letters, things like that. As soon as you do that, you can go do this next thing, we can get this next thing. Not getting upset, not raising your voice, not getting nervous. You do this smile because, but you don't move when you request it. Otherwise, they'll push us around. They learn really quickly, and they do. And then they feel insecure and lose their trust.
They shouldn't see that you're upset.
There's only one hope for them not seeing that you're upset, and then you can get upset. Because if you get upset, don't think you can do it. Remember, they have unbelievable radar.
What are you writing still? On this ones?
But it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Look, sometimes you have to. The vote is at the side of the vote, so he calls it first aid. says, Father, comes home. He's exhausted. He expects the kids to start. He can get into bed right now. He goes and says, as Rabbi Shona, there's first aid. So sometimes there's first aid. And you don't have to worry if you ever do that, you've ruined the kid forever. There's such a thing as first aid. That's not education. Education takes time. Education is what they're going to hold on to for the rest of their lives. That takes time. And we want a button that's going to make them behave and internalize all these things and be perfect kids right away. If I had this button, so I would make up a lot of money, and I'd share it with most people. I really would. I just don't have such a button. All I know is that it takes a lot of work and a lot of consistency, and you go a few steps forward, a couple steps back, and you put yourself together, and you try again. It's like, you have to give yourself a break. It's not easy. This parenting business, this marriage business, it's not easy. It takes work. That's what it is. That's part of the deal. Once you know it's part of the deal, it's not to get so frustrated by it. When we have expectations, it's all supposed to be perfect and smooth. So then we get frustrated. If we have the expectations, then we get frustrated. Okay, this is really less.
At the beginning, you mentioned that they should be happy with everything that they do, with all these rules and regulations.
Ultimately,
how would they be happy?
I'll give you the biggest proof. I told to my little boys in the junior high school just recently. I said, you guys don't like rules, right? Nobody likes rules. We don't like rules. You know, we're teenagers. We don't like rules. How about when you play basketball? Do rules in basketball bother you? That there's such a thing as a foul if you step on the baseline or you're out of bounds. Or that if there's such a thing as a double dribble or palm and return the ball. I said, how come that doesn't bother you? He said, don't you realize you can't have fun unless there's rules? There was a comic strip called Calvin and Hobbes. But they had a game called Calvin Ball, in which you made up the rules as you went along. So that was cute. But most games have rules. But the computer games, you guys know. Yeah, so I see you arguing with the fact that if he did it and blew you up, then, oh, that's not fair. You say, that's the rule. The reason you can play the game, when the game is fun, is because there's rules. Well, you know what? It's just you want to have fun in this life, you got to know what the rules are. You can think that you don't need to know the rules, but then you can be very unhappy. The natural world has rules, the spiritual world has rules. There's a rule called gravity. You want to try to play around with that one? It doesn't work out so good. There's rules. And there's certain principles that guide life. You have to know that's the way it works. You don't break them, you break yourself against them. So they need to know that that's how you have fun. You see it in sports, you see it in the games that you play. You play Monopoly, there's rules, right? Sometimes you alter the rules. Okay, so you get into a free parking, so the money that's in the middle, you can make your own alter it. But even that has rules. And even Calvin law has rules. The rule is that there's no rules. The rule is you make it up as you go along. That's the rule. Everything's got rules. So if you just explain it, that's the way to do it. I'm trying to help you understand how the rule works. I gotta go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.